Alright, so I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. There's a couple days left of January, but I know I'm not going to be able to finish any of the books that I'm currently reading within that time frame, so I figured I would talk a little bit about all the books that I finished up for this month, which was around 5 or 6. So let's just jump right into it. I finished up Everything I Never Told You. I talked about this more in my previous video, so I'm not going to get too into it, but it is a family portrait. It kind of centers around the disappearance of a girl named Lydia. She is a high school student, I believe, and her biracial family is living in Ohio in the 1970s, and the whole thing is kind of understanding all these characters and the different ways in which they mourn her death, but also trying to figure out what happened to her. It's not a thriller by any means, but it is very interesting because, and the book just kind of delves into each of the family characters, and at the end you do find out what happened to Lydia. I also read Girls in Pants, the third summer of the sisterhood. I really love this series. I think it's cute and it's fun and it's sweet, but it's also grounded in reality. I think I said this before last summer, and this book was no different. I really enjoyed it because the second movie is a combination of a lot of the books, so everything's so much more rushed, and here you really get a chance to really learn more about these characters as they're growing up and as they're reaching the end of high school and transitioning into college. It's a lot of fun. I want to talk about certain storylines, but I'd be spoiling them, so I'm not going to. But I definitely love this book, and I do have the fourth one on my shelf right now, but I'm probably not gonna have a chance to read it for the month of February, but we'll see. Either way, I love the series, and this was no exception. I finished The Timekeeper, which is a very short story about a man who was punished by God for inventing the first clock, and he is then put on a mission to redeem himself by convincing two people on Earth the true meaning of time. There's a bunch more to the story. It's very beautifully written and very easy to follow, so I definitely enjoyed it. Really an interesting premise, I would say. So moving along to the last book that I finished up, which is a James Baldwin book. This is in the classic section. Though originally I meant to take out another one of his novels, but the barcodes are messed up basically, so my library gave me this one instead of the one that I requested, even though they're both under that name, so I don't know. But this book is Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. The protagonist is a 14-year-old boy who's living in Harlem in the 1930s. His stepfather is a minister at a Pentecostal church in Harlem. Did I mention that? So it's basically a discovery of his spirituality and self-identity, and he's exploring who he is as a person through all these different obstacles, because his father is verbally and physically abusive, his stepfather. As a reader, you're aware that that's his stepfather, but the protagonist doesn't really find that out, at least in the beginning. It's a very rich story. I absolutely love the writing, and it's also quite short as well. It's only like 300 pages. And I want to say more, but I feel like I'd just be spoiling a lot of the different elements that come to play here. But his hesitation with fully accepting the church in which he attends and with the church is that his stepfather is a figure of the church and he's so corrupted. John, who's 14 years old, has a hard time processing that and learning to separate both in his mind. So anyway, either way, I really love this and I do recommend it. That is my wrap up for January. Those are the books that I've read. I'm happy with it because I've been reading, you guys, and that is great news to me. Hopefully I can keep it up. Classes start February 1st for me, so my TBR is going to be a lot of fun because I have February is going to be sort of themed for me, which I never do themed TBRs, but I'm hoping to get everything that I have on my list read by the last week of February, and you will see why in my next video. So that being said, I'll see you guys next time, and thanks so much for stopping by.